very least, to try and get a bit more legitimacy if this policy is passed?
Look, scientists will tell you the numbers are there to support the fact that vaccines lead to lower transmissibility of COVID-19. And, the graphs are there in other countries around the world. It doesn't mean you won't get the virus,
right,
but certainly it does limit the severe illness or possibility of being hospitalized with serious COVID-19 symptoms. But that is our lot for this Monday morning, kicking off the week with a bang. William Gumby continues with Newsfeed AM. Stay with us.
Why are you trying to?
Your cup is there, Beth.
Why did you leave it there? Run. I mean, she tells me this very. Yeah. Miss. Why are you using burner phones? I'm actually going to burn you for this shit. Yeah. Yeah. Aye. As? Remember Zuma? Mr. Lombard. You good, sir? Happy Monday to you too.
Are you normal coffee or cappuccino or?
Cappuccino, no sugar.
No sugar.
Just nice and hot.
All right. Yo.
Top stories at 9. Convicted murderer and Paralympian Oscar Pistorius, who killed his model girlfriend Riva Steenkamp, has been transferred to a prison in Gqeberha, that's in the Eastern Cape province. This is a move to facilitate a victim-offender dialogue ahead of parole consideration. The Ministerial Advisory Council on COVID-19 has welcomed President Cyril Ramaphosa's suggestion for a mandatory vaccination program. Government has set up a task team to consult on the issue. Meanwhile, the Health Minister, Dr. Joe Phaahla, and various scientists will update the nation following President Cyril Ramaphosa's address last night. The country remains on alert level 1 despite news of the Omicron variant. And in a bid to extend South African companies' footprint in Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa is heading to West Africa to forge strategic relationships and foster economic growth. Very good morning to you. Welcome to the Monday edition of Newsfeed AM. Lots in the offing over the next 3 hours, including this important question. It may seem very plain and it's nothing serious, but do we understand how vaccines work? We've been told over a number of times now that vaccines do not necessarily prevent the transmission of the coronavirus pandemic, but what they do prevent against is death and the mutation of the virus itself. So how much of this do we understand as members of the public? That's the question I'll be putting to Dr. Mvuyisi Mzugwa. He's the Deputy Chairperson at the South African Medical Association. That and lots more interviews in the offing for you over the next 3 hours. With that said, let's head straight to our top story. And we begin with this. Former Paralympian Oscar Pistorius has been moved to a facility in Gqeberha to partake in the Victim Offender Dialogue program with the parents of Riva Steenkamp. The program will create an opportunity for reconciliation between the parties, which may lead to the consideration of his parole. Now, Pistorius killed his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, on Valentine's Day 8 years ago. He maintains that he mistook her for an intruder. To this now, the co-chair of the Ministerial Advisory Council on COVID-19, Professor Koleka Mlisana, has welcomed the suggestion by President Cyril Ramaphosa that vaccination may need to be made mandatory. Now, Ramaphosa announced this move that a task team will be set up to look into making vaccinations mandatory for entrance to public events and other activities. Now, Mlisana says what is needed now is to educate people about the importance of vaccinating, especially as the country currently has enough vaccine stock.
As he mentioned very clearly, and I think every South African is now aware, that really if we are going to make an impact and be able to live with this pandemic, live with SARS-CoV-2, we need to do a few things, and we need to do those, almost 100%. And as we know, firstly, it becomes, the NPIs, social, public health and social measures. We need to stick to that. And then the main one becomes vaccination. And as he overemphasized last night, the importance of vaccination. Now, the challenge as a country that we have had insofar as vaccination is concerned is that we no longer have a problem with supplies. We've got, in fact, more than enough vaccines. We no longer have a challenge with vaccination sites. So, the sites are there. They are almost empty, most of them. What we really are in short of is people coming in for vaccination. Now, to get people to come in for vaccination, there has been a lot that we are all aware of of negative talks, all the conspiracy theories. So there's an element of education that is required, and you can never educate, communities enough. But over and above that, I think, as Dr. Dasu says, I fully agree with him. I think we've come to a point now where a lot of means have been done to get people to come to vaccinate.
Well, let's continue with this story. After a weekend of scrambling by travelers following travel bans by various countries after the emergence of the Omicron variant, OR Tambo International Airport is relatively quiet this morning. Last night, President Cyril Ramaphosa denounced the decision by these countries to impose travel bans on southern African countries. Newzroom Afrika's Linda Mnguni is at the OR Tambo International Airport and joins us live now. Linda, very good morning to you. So the situation this morning, you've been there since the early hours. What have you observed? Frustration, I think, is what characterized the kind of description that those who wanted to travel out of the country would have not possibly gotten their flights. How is the situation this morning on a Monday?
Well, Kole, I guess you can call it the calm after the storm. I mean, nobody could have anticipated the emergence of a new variant, particularly looking at the festive season. Now that we're going into the festive season, there will, of course, be a lot of traveling. Now, that announcement last week threw the spanner in the works, really, for travelers and really caused havoc and chaos within the airlines industry. But from what we're hearing from Airports Company South Africa, I mean, the OR Tambo International Airport as well as the Cape Town International Airport have really been, affected. We're the ones that were really affected by this, announcement. But over the past couple of days, it seems airlines have been able to communicate with their commuters, sending down the message really that there has been those travel bans, and that, of course, at this point, there's nothing that they can do given the fact that some countries have decided to move their travel bans from Monday to Saturday, and some even on Friday. So which means that travelers that are coming from South Africa, if you were not a resident of that particular country, you would not be able really to come back into that country, particularly if you're South African and traveling to different countries. It meant that you wouldn't be able to go into those countries. So we saw that, that mayhem and that chaos play out over Friday and Saturday. But from what also Airports Company South Africa is saying is that yesterday things started to fizzle out, and as you can see behind me right now, it's really been quiet, a very quiet morning here at the OR Tambo International Airport. Many of the travelers that we've been able to engage with are indicating that they haven't been inconvenienced by the travel bans. They're going to the countries that have not imposed travel ban. So at this moment, it seems those who were scrambling over the weekend might have found different plans.
Well, Linda Mnguni, let's leave it there. We'll keep touching base with you just to gauge what people who are trying to either leave the country or those that are returning to the country, of course, after the panic that's been caused to say that the travel to southern African nations might be restricted. So we'll keep checking on Linda Mnguni as the day progresses. But let's continue with this story. President Cyril Ramaphosa will be heading to West Africa next week in a bid to expand South African companies' footprint on the continent. Now, Ramaphosa will meet with leaders from Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire to form strategic partnerships. Now, in his weekly newsletter released this morning, the president saying a number of South African businesses operate in these countries. Now, the aim is to create sustainable growth opportunities and shared prosperity. Now, the president said African leaders are focused on creating a sustainable economic recovery following the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the visit coming after the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area earlier this year. All right, let's pick up on this story now. We're joined by our senior reporter, Dumalo Mhlaudi, who is in a fortunate position. You are going to be traveling alongside the president. That's what the little birdie has told me. How's it feeling so far?
It's feeling great, Colin. Your little birdie is absolutely correct. A very fortunate position indeed. I will be accompanying the president. He will also be accompanied, I am told, by ministers in the cabinet that deal with, of course, the economic cluster, as well as social development. So there will be a couple of ministers there. And indeed, the aim there is to try and forge this particular economic trade area. Because, you know, as you listed some of the countries that are going to be visited, Nigeria, of course, Ghana, which I'll be fortunate to accompany him on, Senegal. These countries mostly would deal with trade with Europe rather than intra-Africa trade. Of course, we have a footprint in those countries. By we, I mean South Africa has a footprint in those countries. But President Cyril Ramaphosa are really looking to expand on that. And if you look at the figures in terms of the trade of the Africa free trade that he has established, 3.4 trillion rand. So if that money can start circulating within the continent, in fact, break the hold that, for instance, Francophone countries have within the Francophone-speaking region. This will certainly be a big boost for the African continent in terms of trade.
Well, and we're talking about intra-African trade on the back of a very frustrating decision, to put it mildly, that has been taken by Western nations. You talk about the US, the UK, and some countries in Europe, or the countries in the European Union. And the president making it clear last night that the ban, there is no scientific reason for it. But if the communication on social media is anything to go by, Dumalo, the Western nations, or should I say countries abroad, may not necessarily be the only ones. Of course, this is subject to confirmation. Rwanda, there was some statement circulating on social media yesterday suggesting that that country had also imposed some kind of a ban from the Southern African nations to that country, Rwanda. If that is true, I wonder how fellow African states are going to treat Rwanda, because it is going against the grain.
Yeah, it's certainly going against the grain, and Goldie, we still have to get confirmation, because I've been trying to reach out to the Rwandan High Commission here in South Africa and to find out specifically, is this communique that is going out on social media authentic, or is it perhaps misinformation? We know that you know, social media can at times be open to people who are not authentic, putting things up and pretending, purporting to be official statement. We know that at the outbreak of COVID-19 here in South Africa, government had to work very hard to deal with misinformation, with people who were using social media, purporting to be communicating on behalf of government, and spreading all sorts of misinformation about how the jab can you know, affect men specifically. And this is one of the reasons that was given for the initial reluctance for people to get inoculated. And so that has been something that government has had to work within our experience in South Africa very hard to basically turn around. So that's something to look out for. And
I remember now that you used the example of why some people were hesitant to take the jab, but the president making fun of this situation himself on one of the campaign trails. I think this was in the lead up to the local government elections, that there is a suggestion that you know, you might not be able to do your business in the bedroom. Making fun of that. But look, here's the important bit. The president is traveling to the West African nations in order to encourage intra-Africa trade, and is going to be tagging along with him some South African businesses. There has been difficulty, particularly in countries like Nigeria. MTN is one particular company that I think at one point faced a fine that was imposed on it by Nigeria for one or other reason. So trade in these countries has somewhat been difficult, and so I imagine these are some of the things that the president might want to iron out with fellow African leaders. And speaking of Nigeria, the understanding is that our Minister of International Relations and Cooperation is already there, Naledi Pandor.
Yes, and I think that is in line with what you have just highlighted. In fact, those difficult years where there was a lot of tension diplomatically between Nigeria and South Africa, where MTN was caught essentially in the middle, because what had happened, if my memory serves me correct, is that Nigeria and South Africa were having a back and forth with the issue of passports, the issue of visas, and how that spilled over into diplomatic wrangling when statements and counter-statements were then released, which both countries felt were very unfortunate. And so Nigeria then fined MTN for operating and allegedly, beyond its, how can I say, scope of responsibility in terms of paying taxes. And so this was a big international thing. It seems that now Minister Pandor is going there to smooth things out with President Cyril Ramaphosa and his delegation coming through with the businesses to try and make sure that what's in the past is in the past. And now they want to look forward to making sure that relations are going through formally and are going through smoothly. Another issue of concern when you look at the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa is Nigeria is concerned that, with South Africa, there seems to be a perception that Nigeria is also a country that is helping those or harboring those who deal with fraud and so forth. And those misconceptions are something that really want to be put aside so that business relationships can be strengthened.
Senior reporter Tumalo Mhlaudi, thank you very much. I wish I were in your seat, accompanying the president as he undertakes this tour of the West African nations to encourage trade. Coming up, we are going to speak to the deputy chairperson of the South African Medical Association, Dr. Mnguni, and we're also going to be looking at the Matric Rage celebrations in KwaZulu-Natal. That actually was something that the president touched on last night. Karinda Jagmohan is going to be telling us what she is hearing on the ground about these rage parties. That in a moment. You want me to go across?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. Eh?
The sparkling was still. Sparkling was still.
Still.
Maybe by the end of our crossing. But he's rising very fast.
Sure. Agreed. Karinda Jagmohan.
Hi, good morning, Holly. How are you?
You missed me already.
Sorry. I do. So quiet.
Dr. Mnguni.
Hi, Polly. How are you, man?
Hayi kuhle bawo xolo. Kwakho sakhawulisa phana pha.
Okay, no, I understand, man.
Talk to you in a moment.
In 10,
Thanks, man.
8, and 7.
This is Newsfeed AM. Let's pick up on this story now. In KwaZulu-Natal, the Matric Rage celebrations in Balito and Umhlanga look set to go ahead. There's been no word from organizers about the possible postponement or cancellation of the event, which led to a cluster outbreak last year, if you'll recall. Now, this is despite the president last night urging the postponement of these Matric parties. Newzroom Afrika's Karinda Jagmohan is on the ground monitoring the situation. Karinda, what is the latest? Are you hearing any movement at all as to the postponement or cancellation of these rage parties?
Not at all. No movement yet. I've been monitoring the festival's social media pages, specifically their official website. I checked it this morning, and it seems the Belito Rage 2021 that is expected to start tomorrow is all set to go. No word on the official Instagram page either. My colleague Spongiseni Nkubande is just zooming in now. We're in Belito, just near what the festival calls the Sound Factory. The white dome you are seeing is one of the main stages for this festival to take place. They've been setting up over last week, and as you can see, they're just about done and ready to go. Now, organizers last posted specifically on the Instagram account, which is, you know, this party is of course for youth, so they're using social media that the youth are predominantly more active on, and so they last posted on their account 3 days ago, speaking about the protocol when entering the festival, as well as the vaccine mandates they have and testing mandates they have in place once you are about to enter. But following what we saw last night, with the president himself urging those matriculant celebration parties to be postponed, we haven't heard yet from the organizers on whether they'll in fact go ahead and postpone these events. And the cause for concern here is that these events, while on paper could be following the possible protocols, realistically, when you have youth on the ground in party mode, consuming alcohol as well, they may not necessarily be wearing their masks. They're coming from across the country, and we know that the new variant that has been detected by our scientists, we're unsure about how contagious it may be. It could be more contagious than what we have previously seen, and thus we could see another contribution to the imminent fourth wave the country is expecting in December. The same thing happened last year. We saw following this party, actually the party began on the 27th of November and ended around the 4th of December last year. And on the weekend of the 5th and 6th, then we saw a number of young people who attended the Rage Festival test positive. The NICD detected cluster outbreaks, and ultimately of the over 2,200 people that attended this event last year, including crew members, 37% of them tested positive for the virus. It's said to have contributed to the second wave we saw overtake KwaZulu-Natal in December, and ultimately led to increasing our lockdown levels that impacted our economy and small businesses that were supposed to thrive on tourism. To give you an idea, at that time, around the 1st of December, there were just over 300 new cases daily. And then by the 6th of December, we saw 804 new cases overnight. We're seeing similar increases currently in terms of our daily new cases in KwaZulu-Natal. About the 25th of November, we saw 68 new cases overnight. And on the 27th of November, the Health Department in KZN reported just 110 new cases overnight. So the numbers are indeed increasing as we see the introduction of the new variant. And on the ground, small businesses are worried about the impact that lockdown levels may have, or increased lockdown levels may have, on their local economy. We haven't seen any move to a more stringent lockdown level yet. The president has urged South Africans in the meanwhile to take care of themselves at this point, but it's up to people on the ground at this point. It seems the Rage Festival is going ahead.
Karinda Jagmohan, thank you very much for that update and the background to these parties. Hopefully the organizers are going to give us some indication soon. On to this now. The recent increase in COVID-19 numbers is driven by the newly detected variant in the country. It's called Omicron. Now, South Africa recorded 2,858 new cases in the past 24 hours alone. This is down from Saturday's 3,220. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says while there are several concerns about the Omicron variant, there is still not enough data to show how it will behave going forward. But do we have the tools to protect ourselves against it? We're joined now by the Deputy Chairperson of the South African Medical Association, Dr. Mvuyisi Mzugwa. Doctor, thank you very much for your time. Can I just begin by asking you this basic question, and that is that vaccines, as has been communicated before, do not stop the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, but they do prevent against death and the mutation of the virus. How well understood and widespread do you think this message is?
Good morning, Koli, and good morning to your viewers. Thanks for having someone in your program. Well, it is very important to stress that, yes, whilst the vaccines cannot stop the vaccinations, cannot stop the spread of the virus from one person to the next, from the vaccinated person to the next person, but it reduces the amount of that, the rate at which that happens. Secondly, it is the issue of hospitalization. Already, we have data in that regard, where it suggests that there has been a decrease, a significant decrease actually, and even prevention of death when it comes to people who are admitted and are vaccinated. And the number of admissions are very, very low amongst the vaccinated. Yeah. It is a known data we have in the country.
Well, that is actually a very interesting point that you have just added to this first question, Dr. Mzugwa, and that is, should the Ministry of Health, which communicates these numbers almost every day, and we get this information towards the evening, early evening, and you see it as breaking news as to how many people have been infected, how many people have died, should the Department of Health start differentiating between those who are hospitalized and are not vaccinated versus those who are going to hospital but have been vaccinated?
That is a very interesting point that you're coming up with, Koli. I think that would help the community to understand what is happening, especially when it relates to vaccinations. Because what has happened is that we have not had much of the counter information that comes from the Department of Health versus the misinformation that circulates in the social media. I think what we have noted was that long time ago there were people who were arrested for misinformation, but it ended there. There is nothing that is really being done now to counter that misinformation at the moment. But what you are raising now could be of very significant assistance to the communities.
Yeah. Let's touch on the matter of vaccine mandates. The president saying last night, and I quote here, if we don't address this issue seriously as a matter of urgency, we continue to be vulnerable to new variants and will continue to suffer new waves of infections. Now, we know that there's a task team that has been put together in order to conduct consultations. How long do you think these consultations should go on for versus what is needed now, which is to act with speed? Because at issue right now is the performance of the economy and whether or not this is actually going to be a drag on the recovery.
Well, Polly, if what the fellow South African, our president, said last night, if what he said is anything to go by, would expect that to be taken seriously and with the speed that is required, to make a decision as soon as we can. Those consultations must take place. I think they've already started at NetLeg, so we shouldn't be delaying. But also we need to have also the president clarifying the initial stance that he made, that vaccines won't be mandatory. I think we now know that we are dealing with a moving target. We do know that things change. I think he should have made clarity on that regard, not just to change, do a U-turn without clarifying that stance.
Dr. Mvuyisi Mzugwa, thank you very much for your time and indeed insights on these matters. We are now going to try and see if we can get you an update on how the markets are doing on the back of this newly discovered variant. And we're going to be speaking to the Chief Investment Officer at Benguela Global Fund Managers, Zwelakhe Mnguni, and he's going to talk to us about matters affecting the markets this morning. This is Newsfeed, the AM edition. Gents, can I have some white paper here, please? Sure. All right. Kupano Kumbi.
Hello, Mr. Mgambi. How are you?
Are you stuck there? Aren't you supposed to be back already?
We are almost stuck. It's not cute.
Listen, might we touch on that?
But we're coming home. We are coming home, yes.
Very good morning to you. If you're just joining us, let's give you the markets update now. The JSE opening to mostly weaker Asian markets this morning, but there were some signs of recovery for assets, and the nosedived after the news regarding the Omicron variant. Now, the oil prices recovered more than 4% in early trade, but overall, the sentiment was fragile. Zwelakhe Mnguni is Chief Investment Officer at Benguela Global Fund Managers, and he joins us now to talk us through the developments. As far as the markets are concerned, Mnguni, thank you very much for your time. Let's begin with the rand, which has fallen sharply on the announcement that South African scientists had detected this new variant called Omicron, and of course the government bond yields affected adversely. What is uppermost in the minds of investors, perhaps, should be my question.
Yeah, thanks, Tolly. Good morning to your viewers. Certainly, the developments around the new variant of the virus have meant that there was a panic and globally, not only in our markets. And I think what concerns investors is that are we possibly going to move into an environment where there could be lockdowns? And I think we saw Europe and the US moving fast to basically ban travel from South Africa or Southern Africa. So what us investors is that in that environment, I mean, the fragile economic recovery that we saw in South Africa might actually disappear. And this virus is quite widespread. We could see a reversal in the economic recovery trend globally again.
Yeah. The president maintaining that we are going to remain on lockdown level 1. However, how are the markets reacting, or how are they likely to react to an extremely sharp rise in infections as a result of this newly detected variant?
Yeah, I mean, the market, as one could see on Friday, there was a big overreaction, and I think it was an overreaction where some of the SA Inc. stocks got punished badly. And I think if we do go down the path of maybe more stringent lockdowns, I certainly think that we could see a bit more of a reaction. But I think most of it is in the price now. And I think what investors need to do is to look forward and realize that when we had the first announcement of COVID-19, we basically all dipped, the whole world dipped. But in most markets, we are way above that at the moment. So we did not worry about it too much in the short term. The short term might be an overreaction, but it might be an opportunity to invest in more attractive investment opportunities.
Yeah, the president did say that the government is going to continue monitoring the situation as regards the infections. So if the country does move to higher levels of the lockdown, which sectors will you be most concerned about in terms of their survival?
Certainly the tourism sector is one sector where there will be challenges. So the leisure and entertainment area of the economy would come under pressure. So guys like City Lodge hotels, and I think you saw on Friday, I think City Lodge was down 14% if I'm not mistaken. So those areas of the market where there is likely to be a impact of a higher lockdown status, that would be quite material. The alcohol industry also could be affected because there might be limits in terms of the trading hours. But in general, I think we are to some extent behind the worst is behind us. I mean, I think there will always be a new variant. It's natural for viruses to mutate, but I don't know if we could think of getting back to where we were in 2020. I doubt it. Yeah. I think we'll move along, but there'll always be volatility as we go.
All right, let's conclude our conversation with some company news. The Standard Bank Group publishing its voluntary trading update this morning. Take us through what that update had to say.
Yeah, it looks like they had quite a good trading period for the 10 months to October, end of October. They say that in SA, they continue to see good momentum in terms of funding demand. Their revenue is improving, so they're seeing some of the transaction. I think they said on the credit card side, they basically have hit the levels that they hit in 2019. And in the rest of Africa, the volumes are back up as well. So there's good overall momentum across the business, it would seem. But they highlighted that there is still a bit of the growth in income still tracking behind the growth in expenses, so what they call the negative jaws ratio. So that element was slightly behind, but the impairments are looking much better. They also spoke about the progress they've made in terms of the Liberty takeout. So they've delisted the preference shares now, and they are working towards concluding the buyout of the ordinary shares. So it looks like a positive statement all round. I think there's quite positive momentum in the business.
Zwelakhe Mnguni is the Chief Investment Officer at the Benguela Global Fund Managers. Thank you very much for your time, sir. On to this now. The South African investment program coming to an end at the Dubai 2020 Expo. And our business reporter, Kopano Kumbi, is on the ground to tell us more about the various engagements that have taken place there. Kopano, good morning to you. At least we're saying good morning to you our time. I'm not sure what time it is there. The Invest South Africa program drawing to a close in Dubai. Was it a success overall?
Well, Xoli, it is just about to be noon here in Dubai where we are, and the sun is definitely beating down on us here outside the expo. From a South African perspective, in terms of trying to acquire investments, it seems like it was quite successful. In fact, there were lots of engagements, not just this last week that happened here in person, but over the month they've been engaging with various partners and players virtually as some restrictions continue to hamper people's access in and out of the expo. And so some of those engagements have been happening virtually, but Team South Africa have been trying their best to put their best foot forward. They've made sure to try and do that. They've highlighted some of the key investment opportunities in South Africa. One that we've spoken a lot about with some investors here at the expo is our medical tech industry. That seems to be taking a lot of interest from international investors, as well as our agriculture and agri-processing opportunities that exist there. That seems to be very attractive to investors. And so overall, it looks like the message for Team SA is one of positivity, and that there is some positive investments that should come from this expo, Xoli.
As we conclude our conversation, Kopano, reaction in the UAE on the detection of this Omicron variant of the coronavirus?
Well, it is a little difficult to say, as everybody who enters this expo site especially, it has to be vaccinated. You have to prove your vaccination, and you can only enter with your vaccine card before anything happens. And so most people in and around the expo here have been are quite safe and have, as I mentioned, have to show their vaccination certificates. And so that really is not a concern. But I heard in the news, the local news at least, that they are now encouraging people who were last vaccinated 6 months ago to come to vaccine sites and to get a booster shot here in the UAE. As we know, they've tried to limit the number of flights coming in and out of our own country. But in the meantime, people in and around the Dubai area, as well as the Emirates, all they've asked for currently is to say, please, could you get a booster shot if you were last vaccinated 6 months ago, and otherwise it's business as usual here. Koli, I'm sorry, I have to wrap here because we have been asked by security to move away from this facility, even though we are accredited to be here. They are behind my camera lady Mingi right now, telling her that we are no longer allowed to broadcast. So unfortunately, I have to call it a day here in Dubai.
Well, Kopano Kumbi, thank you very much. We were wrapping it up nonetheless. Sorry about that particular intrusion, because that's what it is. People understand how journalists work, and we don't take too much time doing our thing. It's usually 5 minutes, no more, but some people choose to be difficult at times. Nonetheless, let's move on to this story. The British High Commissioner to South Africa, Anthony Phillipson, says the travel ban by the UK government was done as a precautionary measure while the Omicron variant was being researched. However, the travel ban has been slammed as